Hi, my name is Sonia Franklin, and I'm doing my presentation on Beethoven. Ludwig van Beethoven was a German Baptist. He was born December 17, 1770. He died March 26, 1827. He was a German composer, a crucial figure in the transition between the classical and romantic eras in the Western art music. He remains one of the most famous and influential of all composers. His best-known compositions include 9 symphonies, 5 piano concertos, 1 violin concerto, 32 piano sonatas, 16 string quartets, and his great Mass, the Missa Solemnis, and an opera, Fidelio. He was born in Bonn, then the capital of the Electorate of Cologne and part of the Holy Roman Empire. Beethoven displayed the musical talents at an early age and was taught by his father, Johann van Beethoven, and by composer and conductor Christian Gottlob Neff. At the age of 21, he moved to Vienna, where he began studying composition with Joseph Haydn and gained a reputation as a virtuoso pianist. He lived in Vienna until his death. By his late 20s, his hearing began to deteriorate, and by the last decade of his life, he was almost totally deaf. In 1811, he gave up conducting and performing in public, but continued to compose. Many of his most admired works come from these last 15 years of his life. A little background on him. He was the great grandson of Ludwig van Beethoven, a musician from the town of Mechelen in the Duchy in Brabant in the Flemish region of what is now Belgium, who was at the age of 20 moved to Bonn. Beethoven was born of this marriage in Bonn. There's no authentic record of the date of his birth. However, he registry of his baptism in a Catholic service at the parish of St. Regis on December 17, 1770. As children of that era were traditionally baptized the day after birth in the Catholic Rhine country, it is now that Beethoven's family and his teacher Johann celebrated his birthday on December 16th. Most scholars accept December 16, 1777 as Beethoven's date of birth. Beethoven's first music teacher was his father. He later had other local teachers, the court organist, Gilles van Eden, Tobias Friedrich Pfeiffer, Franz Rovani. From the outset, his tuition regime, which began in his 5th year, was harsh and intensive, often reducing him to tears. With the involvement of the insomniac Pfeiffer, there were irregular late-night sessions with the young Beethoven being dragged from his bed to the keyboard. Beethoven's musical talent was obvious at a young age. Johann, aware of Ludwig's successor in this area, attempted to exploit his son as a child prodigy, claiming that Beethoven was 6 on the posters for Beethoven's first public performance in March 1778. Sometime after 1779, Beethoven began his studies with most important teacher in Bonn, Christian Gottlob Neff, who was appointed the court's organist in that year. Neff taught Beethoven composition, and by the March 1783 had helped him write his first published composition, a set of keyboard variations. Beethoven soon began working with Neff as assistant organist, at first unpaid, and then a paid employee of the court chapel conducted by Kapellmeister. In March 1787, Beethoven traveled to Vienna for the first time, apparently in the hope of studying with Mozart. The details of their relationship are uncertain, including whether they actually met. Having learned that his mother was ill, Beethoven returned about 2 weeks after his arrival. His mother died shortly thereafter, and his father lapsed deeper into alcoholism. As a result, Beethoven became responsible for the care of his 2 younger brothers and spent the next 5 years in Bonn. Establishing his career in Vienna. From 1790 to 1792, Beethoven composed a significant number of works that demonstrated his growing range and maturity. Musicologists have identified themes similar to those of the Third Symphony and a set of variations written in 1791. Beethoven was probably first introduced to Joseph Haydn in 1790 when the latter was traveling to London and stopped in Bonn around Christmas time. A year and a half later, they met in Bonn and had his return trip from London to Vienna in 1792. It is likely that the arrangements were made at that time for Beethoven to study with the old master. Beethoven did not immediately set out to establish himself as a composer, but rather devoted himself to study and performance, working under Haydn's direction. He sought to master counterpoint. He also studied violin under Ignaz. Early in this period, he also began receiving occasional instruction from Antonio Salieri, primarily in Italian vocal composition style. This relationship persisted until at least 1802 and possibly 1809. With Haydn's departure for England in 1794, Beethoven was expected by the Elector to return home. He chose instead to remain in Vienna, continuing his instructor in counterpoint with Johann and other teachers. Although his stipend from the Elector by a number of Vienna noblemen had already recognized his ability and offered his financial support, among the Prince Joseph, Prince Karl, and Baron. Beethoven is reported to have dated his hearing loss from a fit he suffered in 1798, induced by rage at the interruption of his work. Having fallen over, he got up to find himself deaf. His hearing only ever partially recovered, and during his gradual decline was impeded by a severe form of tinnitus. As early as 1801, he wrote to friends describing his symptoms and the difficulties they caused in both professional and social settings. The cause of Beethoven's deafness is unknown, but has variously been attributed to typhus, autoimmune disorders such as systemic lupus, and even his habit of immersing his head in cold water to stay awake. The explanation from Beethoven's autopsy was that he had a distended inner ear, which developed lesions over time. Beethoven's late work began a renewed study of older music, including works by J.S. Bach and Handel, that were then began published in the first attempts at complete editions. He composed the overture, The Consecrations of the House. Beethoven was bedridden for most of his remaining months, and many friends came to visit. He died on March 26, 1827, at the age of 56 during a thunderstorm. His friend Anselm Huttenberg was present at the time, said that there was a peal of thunder at the moment of his death. An autopsy revealed significant liver damage, which may have been due to heavy alcohol consumption. It also revealed considerable dilation of the auditory and other related nerves. Beethoven's funeral procession on March 29, 1827 was attended by an estimated 20,000 Vietnamese citizens. Franz Schubert, who died the following year and was buried next to Beethoven, was one of the torchbearers. Beethoven was buried in a dedicated grave in the Warhang Cemetery, northwest of Vienna. After Wakeman Mass at the Church of the Holy Trinity, his remains were exhumed for study in 1862 and moved in 1888 to Vienna. In 2012, his crypt was checked to see if his teeth had been stolen during a series of grave robberies of other famous Viennese composers. There is dispute about the cause of Beethoven's death. Alcohol, cirrhosis, syphilis, infectious hepatitis, lead poisoning, sarcoidosis, and Whipple's disease have all been proposed. Friends and visitors before and after his death clipped locks of his hair, some of which have been preserved and subjected to additional analysis, as have skull fragments removed from during the 1862 exhumation. Some of these analyses have led to controversial assertions that Beethoven was accidentally poisoned to death by excessive doses of lead-based treatments administered under instructions from his doctor.